Hi, welcome to the Mundangerous Thoughts channel. I'm Shane. Today, I want to talk about two subjects that make everyone roll their eyes: Gen Z conservatives and economics. Stay with me. So, Gen Z has lived through stagflation, the COVID supply chain shock, and now global tariffs. They're joining a workforce with the widest income equality gap since World War II. Given they're facing all the economic consequences of Republicans' Ronald Reagan worship, and especially given their drive toward populism, I figured there is one policy they would never tolerate: trickle-down economics. Unfortunately, these TikTok teens are falling into the trickle-down trap without even realizing it, smuggled under the guise of populism. Let's talk about it. Broad strokes, trickle-down economics, or supply-side economics if you're an academic, is a theory where we cut taxes on the rich, and because they have more money, they stimulate the economy so much that working class and middle class people gain wealth too. Or at least the lower classes benefit more than they would from a well-funded government providing social services and safety nets. Because that's the thing. Trickle-down economics is always paired with one of two compensating policies: slashing government spending or massive deficit increases. Reagan did it, Bush did it, Trump did it in 2017. How did that turn out for the average American? This is a largely failed experiment, but it's been part of the Republican playbook for so long that they just keep running it every time they get the presidency. Like your little brother smashing bunch tight end inside switch in Madden all afternoon. Piss off, Tyler. So these clips come from a recent event in Arizona with left-wing political streamer Destiny and a handful of Turning Point USA-adjacent conservative influencers. This guy's named Nathan, he's with Off the Record USA Media, and he's an influencer for them.
I'm Nathan, I'm with Off the Record USA Media, and I am an influencer for them.
There were four people who debated Destiny at this event, and Nathan's arguments were surprisingly stronger than everyone else. So I'll use his discussion to demonstrate how trickle-down economics have infiltrated Gen Z conservatives. Okay, so they're talking economic policy, comparing a hypothetical Kamala Harris economy with the current Trump economy. Destiny has sort of stumbled into the same rhetorical quagmire around the no tax on tips and Made in America tax credits that the Harris campaign did. These are bad policies when aggregated with the rest of the Trump economic platform, but they're not bad policies for individuals. Families will feel that lessened tax burden. That's why Kamala's campaign pivoted to adopt the no tax on tips policy, because it is a decent improvement for the working class without being a huge drain on tax revenues, and it wins votes. Nathan thinks he's winning this point, and then the hard economics lesson arrives. Destiny explains.
I don't know how Republicans or Trump or anybody keep getting this credit for balancing the budget when the deficit and everything keeps getting larger and larger and larger, and they do nothing to curb any of it. But then they get credit for helping Americans because they are, giving the no tax on overtime or tips thing. But it's all just massive deficit spending. Where if a Democrat were to do the same thing, there'd be complaints about inflation and everything else.
How is that deficit spending when it's just saving the American taxpayer money, which means they have more money to put back into the economy? I'm not saying that Donald Trump doesn't raise the deficit, because I think we all know here Republicans are just prone to raising the deficit. I think it's just a requirement for them now, it seems.
How is it deficit spending? Let's go back to our chart. On one hand, Andrew asking for an explanation is commendable. If you don't understand a concept, you should ask about it and learn. But the problem is, Andrew's arguing from a place of some degree of expertise. In this format where there's no pre-reviewed sources or time to fact check, both Destiny and Andrew have to take each other at face value. And that's especially true when you're discussing the hypothetical Harris presidency, since the test is just plausibility. On the other hand, the balanced budget equation is just such a basic macroeconomic fact, it disqualifies them from seriously discussing economic policy any further. It's like your cardiologist not knowing what 120/70 blood pressure means. Sure, I don't know the difference between those numbers, but my job isn't to tell people if their heart is healthy or not. Andrew doesn't know macroeconomics, so maybe he shouldn't opine on the health of the economy or our economic policy. Anyway, this now has turned into an economics lesson, so Destiny will explain again.
Yeah.
Can we agree
Well,
on
when I
that?
say deficit spending, yeah, for sure. But when I say deficit spending, what I mean is that like the government is spending a certain amount of money and now it's reducing its revenue, so it's going to have to borrow even more. So it's just more deficit spending. Like if you were to say tomorrow we're going to do 0% income taxes, you would have to. This is powered by deficit spending. You have to deficit spend even more to cover now all of your lost revenue. So like all of the distributions that Trump is doing to the American public via tax rebates or tax deductions or whatever, they're not being paired with any spending cuts. Like Doge was a monumental failure, and he hasn't cut the budget really anywhere.
Nathan doesn't really understand the concept, much less understand any of the nuance of when deficit spending can be positive and why it's usually negative, or the various levers governments can use to fine-tune policies. So he pivots back to the firmer ground he felt before: money in people's pockets.
And
What do you think when the American taxpayer receives more money? What do you think they do with that money? Do you think they just set it aside and they save it, or do you think they spend it?
I think they spend it.
What do you think they spend it on?
Anything, goods and services. Depends on the class, but
Right, it's going back into the economy. It's going back into state level economy as well.
yeah,
which
but that doesn't
helps
go
us
into the
thrive.
government budget, right?
Well, absolutely, it doesn't go in the budget.
Absolutely it doesn't.
But I'm saying it still goes back into the economy, or it goes back to the government in some sort of way, shape, or form.
Unless it does, in some sort of way, shape, or form. Like magic?
I don't get it. You see, phase 1, collect underpants. Phase 2, phase 3, profit. Oh, I get it. No, you don't, fat ass.
But I'm saying it still goes back into the economy, or it goes back to the government in some sort of way, shape, or form. So it's not just disappearing. It's not sitting in a bank account and losing value, diminishing every single year. It's going back. That's the main point I'm making.
And this is it. This is the modern trickle-down pitch. It sounds like trickle-up economics, whereby you give the working class more money and their purchasing power stimulates economic growth. In principle, this appeals to both the labor-leaning left and the populists on the right. But Nathan has completely separated this single, solitary policy from the rest of Trump's economic platform. It's sleight of hand. We do a little economic populism so nobody notices the huge tax cuts to the rich and the deficit spending that necessarily accompanies it. What is that economic platform? What was the core of the One Big Beautiful Bill? It extended the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, aka the Trump tax cuts, to trot out the same Reaganomics playbook the GOP has been running since 1981, to the tune of $4.5 trillion in deficits over 10 years. The deficit spending is the problem, because that is funded through debt, which is paid by printing more money, which weakens the value of the dollar and ultimately leads to inflation, which means higher prices for the working class. How does that manifest for the American taxpayer? You get a bigger tax refund, but inflation crunches your household budget. Prices go up, your dollar buys you less. To illustrate, it just doesn't matter if your tax return has an extra $5,000 in it when the cost of rent and food and gas has gone up by $1,000 a month. You might feel richer come tax season, but you've lost a net $7,000 of purchasing power over the course of the year. In contrast, if Kamala's policy only reduces your taxes by $2,000, but the rest of her policies combine to limit your household expense increase to $500 per month, you've lost only $4,000 of purchasing power to inflation. You get a smaller tax return check in April, but you've also had more money in your pocket at the end of every month, and still do. It's a better economic policy for you, the taxpayer. It's just less obvious in April. But of course, tax cuts aren't the only way to drive deficit spending. Let's watch now as Andrew struggles with economic equivalence.
But like, if Democrats were to just say we're going to cut a $5,000 check to everybody, would you say the same thing?
Well, that's different.
It's the same thing.
Oh, buddy.
It's different when the government is directly handing you money, or it depends on how much you make.
No, it doesn't. It's the same
yes,
thing.
No, it depends on how much you make, because you look at the no tax and overtime, no tax and tips. You have to receive a certain amount of money per year. If you go past that that threshold, then you know you're not eligible to make that and receive that tax.
Yeah, I understand, but at the end of the day, like you can do it however you want, but at the end of the day, the government is receiving the deficit is measured in revenue against expense. And if you want to increase the expenses by giving everybody a check or reduce the revenue by offering whatever arbitrary tax cuts, you're just increasing the deficit. You're just deficit spending with the government at the end of the day. Whether the Democrats want to give out money or whether the Republicans want to cut taxes,
Yeah.
if you don't pair it with spending cuts, it's just deficit spending.
Destiny is simplifying the concept a bit, but it's directionally correct here. When it comes to managing the deficit and therefore inflation, Trump's $1,000 COVID stimulus checks were economically equivalent to just giving everyone a $1,000 reduction in their tax burden. Now, behaviorally, these aren't strictly equivalent. People respond differently to money gained rather than expenses avoided. There's timing issues, all sorts of stuff. Can Andrew make that argument?
Do you think it's fair to say that we should give us, not us, sorry, us working class, when I say us, I mean working class people, lower income, do you think it's fair to say to give them more of a tax break than the big elites?
He doesn't get it. So instead, Andrew tries to smuggle a moral populist argument into an economic discussion. Should poor people get tax cuts? Is it more fair? In doing so, he gets to reframe the discussion while ignoring the reality. Trump has offered a small tax cut to the working class, but that cut is trivial compared to the huge savings that rich elites will continue to accrue through the Trump tax cut extensions. More importantly, any tax savings for the working class will be cannibalized by inflation, tariffs, an economic slowdown, or all three. Andrew has just baked that into the economic reality, even though a Democratic president would have just let them expire and reclaimed that tax revenue. Kamala would have better balanced the budget, immediately reducing the deficit and the inflationary pressure that's killing the working class, or funded social programs that provide other benefits to the working class, like the ACA subsidies that Trump's big beautiful bill ended. By the way, those 2017 tax cuts were brutal for the working class. Lower quintile households saw an average of $60 of benefit. Amongst wealthy elites, the 1% averaged over $50,000 of benefit, while the 0.1% averaged a benefit of almost $200,000 extra after-tax dollars. Worse, tax revenue shortfalls were more severe than the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, projected for both income and corporate taxes, further driving up the deficit. It's a disastrous policy for the average American. Why would a populist conservative support it? To understand how populism is intersecting with trickle-down economics, let's look at how Andrew ends the discussion, contrasting Kamala's hypothetical deficits with Trump's.
No, the deficit. We both agree the Republicans raise the deficit all the time, but what did Kamala run on for the deficit spending?
I don't know if they spoke specifically about deficit spending.
Okay, so we don't know what she would have done then.
Well, but I mean, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act from Trump is one of the hugest drivers of our massively increasing deficit. It cut all the rates for how much money we could make from people via taxes in the U.S.
Sure, but again, she had no campaign. I mean, okay, we can both agree her campaign didn't start until later on, so maybe she didn't have enough time to get a policy put out there for it.
Well, do you think Democrats would have pushed to extend the Trump tax cuts as much as Trump did?
Probably not, but there's still some programs like tariffs that they probably would have extended.
They would not to the extent that Trump is doing.
Not to the extent, but still continued some. Like Biden still continued.
Sure, some of the ones on
Trump
China.
Tariffs.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, by not extending the tax cuts for the wealthy, Kamala would have avoided a $4.5 trillion deficit, then would have kept the same tariffs against China as Biden, which Trump also kept and then expanded to become global tariffs, and the average American ends up worse for it? How? Her policy, by virtue of relying on none of the deficit spending that Trump planned, has a far superior outlook. Deficits, inflation, and economic uncertainty are all lead weights that Trump has hung on the American economy and the working class. But notice, at no point did Andrew even attempt to defend extending the Trump tax cuts. At best, he's resigned to the foregone conclusion that conservatives will raise the deficit.
I think we all know here, Republicans are just prone to raising the deficit. I think it's just a requirement for them now, it seems.
Does that make any sense? Only if you buy into the trickle-down dogma of Reaganomics. All tax cuts, no matter how they are funded, are economically positive. It's not true, but when you believe that, you'll believe a projected 4% inflation and gas prices over $5 a gallon are actually the best our economy could hope for in 2026, because you got a little bit bigger tax return. Gen Z, it doesn't have to be this way. Hey, if you like what I do here and want to support independent media, click like and subscribe, or maybe drop a comment down below to help the algorithm. It's super helpful to a brand new channel like mine and doesn't cost you a thing. You can check out more of my videos about games, hobbies, and politics here on the Mundangerous Thoughts YouTube channel, or one of these videos that YouTube thinks you might like.